Toledo Blade, University of Toledo Internet Debate. This is an internet debate, new, unique, and we hope it will be informative. It is being streamed on ToledoBlade.com. I am Keith Burris of the Blade. I will moderate the debate. I am joined by three of my colleagues from the Blade who will ask questions of the candidates for mayor. Tom Troy, Marlene Harris-Taylor, and Ignacio Messina. Toledo voters will choose a mayor November 3rd. Let's meet the candidates. They have been seated in alphabetical order. Former Toledo Mayor Mike Bell. Former UT Vice President Sandy Drabick Collins. Former Toledo City Council member Mike Ferner. Former Toledo Mayor Carty Finkbeiner. Current Toledo Mayor Paula Hicks Hudson. And Toledo City Council member Sandy Spang. Here are the rules of the debate. The evening will consist of two parts. The first will be individual questions from our panel of journalists to specific candidates. There will be 3 rounds of these questions. The second part of the debate will consist of questions posed to all the candidates. We will begin that segment with 1 question from each of our journalists and then move to questions received from the public via email or social media. We will end with closing statements by the candidates. Candidates, you will have up to 1 minute to respond to questions in the first part of the debate. Our panel of journalists will have the opportunity to follow up with questions. You will have 30 seconds to answer follow-ups. We will also give any candidate you criticize in an answer a chance for rebuttal. You will have 30 seconds for those responses as well. Near the end of our time together, you will have 90 seconds to deliver a closing statement. We have a timekeeper on set to let you and me know when your time is running out. Please respect the rules and each other. The first question is for Mr. Bell from Ignacio Messina.
Mr. Bell, when you were mayor in 2011, you supported the anti-union Senate Bill 5. Your deputy mayor testified in Columbus as an interested party, and you were briefed extensively on the proposed law. When the referendum to overturn it came up, you still supported it despite overwhelming opposition from the people in the city that you governed. Fast forward to 2015. Since announcing your candidacy, you said you would have not supported Senate Bill 5 if you had known then what you know now. Some say you are being a flip-flopper. What is it exactly that you know now that you didn't know then?
Well, what I know for sure is that what I was intending to do was to make sure that we did not have to lay any individuals off, which would have been union and non-union workers, that we didn't have to raise taxes, and that we didn't have to lower services because we wouldn't have the people. Now, I thought myself personally that that is where the general population was. But it was obvious to me, obviously, if I'm sitting here and I'm rerunning for a mayor's position, that I should have slowed down in being able to explain that portion to people, to let them know that where I'm at is where the people are at. I understand as a mayor that you have to respect the citizens. And in this particular case, because I was on the other side of where the citizens were, even though I felt it was important from the standpoint of not laying people off, not raising taxes, and being able to continue services, if they're not in that, I have to respect where they're at, and I should have come up with a different way to do it.
Okay, my question is for Mrs. Collins. How are you, Mrs. Collins?
Fine, thank you.
It's a pleasure to meet you tonight. And my question is about your name change. For years, you were Sandy Drabick, and now you're Sandy Drabick Collins. Now, why did you change your last name before running for mayor? You know, some people are wondering why you didn't do it during your marriage to the late mayor.
Well, I'd like to answer that the reason that I did change my name was to honor my husband, and also to be consistent and be able to use the name I had been using for the 10 years of my marriage. I used both names, as a lot of times career women do. In my career, I stayed Sandra Drabick because I married later in life and had a long-time career. But I used Collins in my marriage always. And then after Mike passed, because I often said, I'm Sandy, Mike's wife, I couldn't say that anymore. I wanted to honor Mike and be consistent and still be able to use the name that I'd used for the 10 years of my marriage. And I'm very happy that I did that. It was a personal and an emotional decision about Mike and me.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Ferner, in your life as a private citizen and as an activist since leaving council more than 20 years ago, you've been sanctioned with a felony conviction for painting anti-war slogans on public overpasses. And very recently, you participated in a protest to advocate for abortion rights in which a banner was hung over a city overpass, which has the potential to be dangerous. If you become mayor, how will you assure the public that you will uphold the law and will respect the public infrastructure?
Well, first thing I'll do is stay off bridges, Tom. But to answer your question more directly, I intend to uphold the law. As mayor, it would be my responsibility to make sure that the laws are upheld in general. What I did as a protest several years ago was something that I did one day and paid the fines and did the time, and it's behind me, and that's the way I look at it.
Mr. Finkbeiner, you have insisted repeatedly that the deficit you left for Mr. Bell was $8 million in 2010, not $48 million as he insists. Records repeatedly reviewed make it clear that Mr. Bell did in fact face a $48 million deficit in 2010. There was $8.6 million in debt left over from 2009, and a proposed budget that you submitted that included more than $30 million in non-existent revenue and an additional $8.7 million in overstated revenue. In fact, September 2009, you said a $25 million deficit was looming for the following year. Your own budget proposal for 2010 said, quote, 2010 will be one of the most fiscally arduous years in city history. The city will be approximately $30 million out of balance. So, why do you still insist that there was no $48 million deficit in 2010 that Mr. Bell addressed?
Very simply. Mr. Bell's finance team, and you just quoted him, left a very confirming CAFR statement, which was audited by outside auditors, which I have here and we'll see that each one of you get, that affirms that I left an $8 million deficit, which indeed I did, not even using capital improvements money in any way, shape, or form to try to balance the budget. 1 year later, Mr. Bell's numbers show that he had an $8.6 million deficit, or $600,000 more than I did. Well, I proposed a budget to Mr. Bell, and Mr. Bell rejected that budget. He then proceeded with his own budget and blamed me for the $48 million hole that I had submitted to him as a balanced budget. That he's entitled to go his direction with his budget, but that was his budget. I proposed a balanced budget, and some of those things made a great deal of sense. The truth of the matter is I handed over an $8 million deficit to Mr. Bell without spending one cent of additional money from any other source.
Thank you, Mr.
I think Mr. Bell gets a 30-second rebuttal under the rules.
I
if you want
think,
it.
I think that based on what was just stated, there was a $48 million deficit. And we did have to straighten that out. And we brought other people in, business people, union members, and we all sat around the table trying to mark off items. You know, the idea of being able to take and raise the number of what a revenue is, what we basically used to call that in our system is voodoo economics. You got to have good numbers, and we did not have good numbers when I originally started as the mayor.
Okay, my question is for the mayor, Mayor Hicks Hudson.
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, I want to ask you about the dispute between the fire chief and the rank and file members. In September, you announced that you would create a labor management citizen committee to address an ongoing dispute between the chief and the firefighters union. Now, that followed with an announcement that you were going to have a mediator talk to both sides. Now, you were almost immediately criticized by your opponents for being a weak leader and abdicating your role as the leader of the city. Now, was that criticism justified? And now, is creating a committee, is that just passing the buck down the road?
No, it's not passing a buck, and I believe that my leadership is one of working to bring all parties together. The Labor Management Committee is a committee that has a long history in the city of Toledo, and that it has worked over 25 years to make sure that labor and management issues are met in a timely fashion and are done by professionals outside of the hurly-burly of working within the city government itself. I believe that using a mediator is always the best way because of the ability for that person to find the common ground in which for folks to work and come up with a resolution. So therefore, the Labor Management Committee is a committee that has this history that we should use and make sure that it operates timely to help both sides.
But this has gone on for a while, Mayor, and there are those who say that this needs to come to an end for the sake of the city. At what point will you step in?
Well, I disagree that it's for the sake of the city. The point is that this dispute has been ongoing even before I took over in the role as mayor. There were letters sent to my predecessors to deal with this issue of the dispute between the fire chief as well as the union members. And so this particular issue, I believe, is one that we have to look at the safety of our citizens and know that the citizens are being taken care of. If there's an alarm that's called, the fire members will answer it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Spang, you are very new to city government, approaching 2 years on the job as a city council person since you ran for at-large council in 2013 and were elected. Now you're telling us you want to be mayor. Could you please be specific and tell us how you've made your mark on city council and on city government during your time since you've been elected?
From the first moment that I was on council, my voice was a different voice because I was a small business owner. And so I've been able to bring my 30 years of experience in the private sector, my property management experience to my role as city council. I'm prepared to lead. I'm current on all issues that face the city at this time, and I have a passion to bring an innovative new budgeting process forward that will align spending of the citizens' money with their priorities and will release funds so that we can innovate and grow.
Well, my question was more to what have you actually done on council, and what I'm getting at is legislation you might have introduced, programs that you've spoken up to advocate for or against, as the case may be.
I'm very proud of some of the initiatives that I've been able to put into the budget. I was able to get a small business navigator placed in our budget. However, that hasn't been implemented at this time. I was able to get funding for a sign inspector, and we have not had a sign inspector in the city of Toledo, a dedicated sign inspector, for over 20 years. That also has not been implemented. I was able to pass legislation that would require a 20-year maintenance plan, similar to what HUD requires for LMHA, for the nearly 200 structures that Toledo owns and has no preventative maintenance plan for. And to my knowledge, that has not been implemented yet either.
We are now ready for round 2 of part 1. The first question is from Marlene Harris-Taylor to Mike Bell.
Mayor Bell, you know, we've been in this situation before, and it seems like I always get in the position of asking you some sticky questions.
It's okay.
But, you know, there was an accusation made recently concerning your behavior during an encounter at a local bar. Now, you have said that nothing happened, and it's become one of those he said, she said situations. Now, what can you say to people out there who are considering voting for you? They've heard about this incident, but they don't quite know what went on. What can you say to them?
Start off with, the first thing I would say is that it did not happen. But the other portion of that is that I've been a person that has been trusted with the safety of individuals in this city for almost 25 years. And during that period of time, I've traveled everywhere, been a representative of the city nationally, internationally, and never once have I embarrassed the city and acted inappropriate. So I will tell you also that the reason that I've never acted that way is that I have unbelievable parents who taught me a lot of respect and dignity, not only for women, but for everybody. And so the allegations that were made against me were inappropriate, and I am just, it was a very disappointing time in my life to read about that, but absolutely nothing happened. And what I choose to do now is just to move forward with the mayoral campaign.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mrs. Collins, one of the things that Mayor Collins focused a lot of attention on in his campaign and in his administration was his concept of tidy towns, something he borrowed from Ireland to encourage pride in neighborhood cleanliness. That morphed into a plan that he proposed to combine code inspectors and police officers into some kind of a sector office that would look out for safety and building code violations in the neighborhood. I'd like to know if you've followed the progress of that plan and if you plan to get it implemented or if you plan to make any changes in the way it's been implemented so far.
I'm not sure of how deeply it was implemented, but I do think that the Tidy Towns project is wonderful, and I know that code enforcement is important, and I believe that Mike was able to achieve having 2 more code enforcers, but didn't finish the project. I think there's still 2 more that would be hired. So it's not fully implemented, but I think it's a wonderful program because it works with the neighborhood to improve their own neighborhood. We work with them, but that the city can't do everything and keep on doing everything. And so I think it's a great project. I know the city has done parts of it. I would love to look at the rest and be able to fully implement it. I think it's a wonderful program.
Thank you.
Mr. Ferner, you have been a long-time opponent of paying tax incentives and giving city-owned property to corporations in exchange for getting them to locate in Toledo and provide good-paying jobs and tax revenue. You opposed the parking garage proposal from ProMedica in Promenade Park. You were also against the corporate welfare offered to Jeep, as you called it, for a proposed expansion of that company. These are tools that governments like Toledo use in numerous instances, including the 1998 effort to retain the Jeep assembly plant. If elected, will you be the anti-business mayor?
I think when you read the literature that has been written for called industry publications, or city and state in this case, economic development professionals as far back as when I was on city council around the country have said that tax breaks for big corporations are one of the last things they consider on their list. I think they know that they can get them, that they can wring them out of local communities. That doesn't mean that it's that big of a deal to them. And furthermore, I think that it's not a very business way, it's not a very business-like approach. I mean, what business person would go into an agreement with another business person and simply accept a list of 10 demands and say, well, I guess that's how we'll do it? No, you negotiate. And you negotiate with some backbone. And you protect the tax base of the city of Toledo so that we have good schools and we can provide the services that we need to. So that's how I would approach it.
So your answer is no. You would not be an anti-business mayor.
No.
Okay. The next question is for former Mayor Finkbeiner. Mayor, I have a similar question about character for you. I asked Mr. Bell a question about his character. I have a character question for you as well. You know, as the voters consider whether to rehire you, they're not only just considering your record, they're also considering your temperament. Now, it's been widely reported that you were involved in altercations with members of the public and with your staff. Many of your staff members have quit, charging that you verbally abused them and humiliated them. And former employees filed discrimination lawsuits against you, costing taxpayers nearly $500,000. So I ask you, what have you learned about how to treat employees from all this? And also, can the public expect more of the same if they decide to rehire you?
I've got a lot of passion and also have high standards, and I have been known to chew out, in some cases royally, individuals who I felt their standards were lacking. One individual accused me of throwing a coffee cup at her. That never happened, but I guarantee you her standards were dramatically lacking when it came to integrity on that given issue. I have had this disposition, if you will, my entire life. I'm not going to change. I got high standards. I demand high commitment to hardworking public employees. I live up to that standard on my own platform, and I expect my colleagues to do the same.
Well, might I ask, sir, what about the altercations with people in the general public? Do you think that that's fitting behavior for a mayor?
I don't know who you're referring to, but I do know that in Mr. Skiatis' case, there was no victory for Mr. Skiatis. He lost royally in court. Almost every time I have been challenged, we have won the case. In terms of the charge by a couple of city employees who we felt had simply refused to work at their jobs, we felt very justified in terminating them, and I feel as justified today as I did then.
The Ohio Civil Rights Commission did side with them, sir.
They did. That's absolutely correct. That does not mean that the Ohio Civil Rights Commission is always right either, dear.
The city did have to pay out millions of dollars, though.
They had to pay out, no, not millions of dollars.
I'm sorry,
They had to
nearly,
pay
I'm
out,
sorry, you're
they
right, I'm
had to
wrong
pay
about
out in
that.
excess
Nearly
of-
$500,000,
Yeah,
yes.
that's true, and I disagreed with that, as did the attorney that was representing the city of Toledo in that case.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
This is for Mayor Hicks Hudson. You as mayor, maybe more so than as a council person, must feel the financial straitjacket the city is in because of the lack of growth in income tax revenue. The city has not raised taxes in more than 30 years and can barely pay for anything other than police and fire services. The issue of opening a few swimming pools is a crisis that we have every year. So my question to you is, previous administrations have shifted burdens to the county. Trash collection under Mayor Bell, criminal justice, some portions of it under Mayor Collins. Are there city expenses and services that you think can or should be transferred to county, regional, or state government? Or do you think it's time to raise the city's income tax rate?
I think we have to look at a variety of ways in which to grow our economy and grow our revenue into the city. I think it's important that before we make any changes in terms of increasing that revenue, is that we look internally to the work that we are doing and to try to streamline it and make more efficiencies. I have been in preliminary conversations with the county on some of the departments that we have duplication, such as the plan, code enforcement, building inspection, and things like that. And we're working and looking at ways in which we might be able to join those departments to streamline and to bring and drive efficiencies. So it's my intent and my goal to continue along that path to find ways in which we can collaborate and look at ways to ensure that we are really being efficient in our dollars being spent and in the use of our employees.
Merging the building inspector's office is something that's been talked about year after year, administration after administration.
Yes.
Is yours going to be any different than those that have gone before you?
It is my intention not to just talk about anything, but actually to put action behind that. And so I intend to explore it and make sure that it makes sense for us. And if it makes sense for the city and the county to do it, then I intend to do it.
Ms. Spang, this question is about something you alluded to. During your limited time on Toledo City Council, one of the things you pushed for was a facilities audit, which would have cost taxpayers $100,000. A top fleet and facilities official explained that city employees already know what's wrong with the city buildings, and that money would be better spent actually fixing the buildings than hiring someone to tell you what you already know. During a public hearing, you refused to drop the issue and pressed it. Looking back, were you being inflexible? And as mayor, would you also ignore the advice of long-term city employees the same way you did from your council seat?
I think that it was very appropriate to continue to press for that, and it actually turned into a wonderful collaboration because we were able to work with the department that handles insuring our properties, and it was determined that that information would aid them in valuation of those properties also. So we were able to find the funds. They were already planning to have a reevaluation of the property, and the same vendors that can do that work can also do those longer-term maintenance plans. So I think that this is a real win for us in the sense of collaboration. I can understand the frustration of a city employee who doesn't have the resources to take care of the properties the way that they know that they should be taken care of. So I'm certain that this is going to be a real tool.
I think my question was, would you push forward with your own thoughts, or would you respect the thoughts of employees who've been in the system for a long time and might have more knowledge about it?
Oh, as an employer myself, with a small business and 13 employees, I always seek the input of my employees. They bring great wisdom, and so because they're actually they're the boots on the ground doing the job. So I would always seek the information from the employees. I don't think in this case that they felt that it was not going to be valuable. I think they were frustrated with understanding how they could bring that into their budget. So no, I would say that by very nature, I'm a highly collaborative person and seek input from those around me.
Round 3. The first question is from Tom Troy to Mike Bell.
And before I start, I want to thank all of you for stepping up and running for office and sticking your necks out, and for coming here and answering these questions, some of which might seem tough, but they're interesting, and it's interesting to hear how you respond to them. I think the viewers are finding it interesting as well and illuminating. My question to Mr. Bell is, the developers who bought the Marina District in 2011 for $3.8 billion have done nothing with the property. If you're mayor, what would you do to spark development on that property? Would you expect the current owners to step up, as they have not done so far? Would you expect to exercise the $3.8 million buyback provision that comes up in 2016?
Well, let me say something from the beginning, that the investors actually did step up at a crucial time for us in the city. We had a $48 million deficit. We were trying to not lay off city employees, not cut services, and not raise taxes. That $3.8 million that they paid for that land that had been sitting vacant for 10 years with nothing happening actually saved about 80 city jobs, union and non-union. In addition, they're currently paying $100,000, over $100,000 a year in taxes. So although they didn't develop, which there were a lot of developers in the United States that could not develop, and they were right here, I think that with the movement and the synergy that's being created by the ProMedica project, that the importance of that particular piece of property will become good again, and I think that you'll see movement in that area.
Do you think it will be better marketed by the current owners, or do you think the city should be back in control of that property?
I don't think the city should be back in control of it at all, because we were losing money with that property sitting there. What I think is that there needs to be a partnership with the current investors and local investors to be able to move that project forward.
Mrs. Collins, the next question is for you. You were a registered Republican. You were a director in the cabinet of Republican Governor George Voinovich. You still have a lot of Republican support. Yet, you are running as a political independent. Are you hiding your true political nature this campaign in order to win votes in a democratically leaning city, home to many people who would reject Republicans simply for that title?
The answer is no, I'm not hiding that. What I am doing is being true to the platform that I have established, that I helped Mike build, and that I will follow, which is very much independent. Mike was a lifelong independent, and his platform was independent, and I support it fully. But I would like to say that the policies and the platform of Governor Voinovich are very much middle kind of policies, and that's where I have always been. I would say I'm fiscal, conservative, but with a social conscience. So I believe that my true leaning is to independence, and that's why I am doing this independent of any party connection or help.
Thank you.
Okay, my next question is for Mr. Ferner. How are you?
All right.
Mr. Ferner, everyone else on this stage has owned a business or they've directed a large government agency. And as far as I know, you have no such experience. So can you tell us what in your background qualifies you to take over management of city government with so many employees?
Well, actually, I did have a small business for 3 or 4 years. That's how I supported myself after getting out of government. I sold energy efficiency systems to state and local governments around Ohio. But to answer your question directly about what is in my background that would allow me to do a good job as mayor, I've been an organizer, and I think that's one of the most important things that I bring to this job, because that means that you have to know how to work with people, you have to be able to listen, you have to be able to step back and not be the person that takes credit for everything. And I think those are qualities that any mayor would do well to have.
Those are great qualities, but have you ever managed a large budget?
No, I haven't. No.
Okay,
But
thank you.
when I was on city council, I got a lot of experience. I was on the finance committee.
Okay.
And the Mayor McHugh put me on the finance committee and also put me on the subcommittee that was in charge of labor negotiations. So although I haven't been doing that in a management position, I do have a lot of exposure to it.
Okay, thank you.
Former Mayor Finkbeiner, you've introduced into this election campaign the idea of creating metropolitan government, merging city and county governments, something that you didn't really implement or try to implement in your previous terms as mayor that I can recall. So what's different this time to spark your interest in that issue? And in the 2 years that would be available to you, please tell us what specific steps you would take to begin merging city and county government.
Walked in this building, Dorman Theater tonight at the University of Toledo campus, Mr. Troy, and I thought of 1965 or 7 when this municipal university became a state university. And I also thought of how dynamically it has grown since that time. The University of Toledo's Medical College just a few years ago merged with this main campus of the University of Toledo. And 3 truly dynamic cities. Indianapolis, that was once the same size of Toledo and now is in excess of 1 million people. Louisville, Kentucky, Jacksonville, Florida, all have moved from the city government structure to a united city-county structure. I've not heard a critique or criticism of any one of those 3 examples. I think so many Toledoans that do not live in the city and help us take care of all of the urban issues and problems, many of them live now outside of our urban center. I think it would be healthy and good for all of us in Lucas County to be under the same governmental roof. I think it would bring about economies of government. Just this week we heard that we may not be able to pay a $1.3 million bill to CCNO. If we had one government, a unified city-county government, that would not even be an issue. It would be paid for and we'd be done with it. You're right.
Mayor, you're over your time.
All right, sir.
Do you have a follow-up?
I was kind of hoping we could take advantage of the time and ask all of them to briefly comment on that question of Unigov, MetroGov. Very briefly, if all of you could say where you stand on the issue of merging city-county government. Start with Mayor Bell.
Where I stand is that right now we don't have the trust of our neighbors in the suburbs to even be able to consider something like that. What I believe needs to occur is that we have to come up with projects that may work and test the idea of that concept. One of the things that we can do right now is start working together with our neighbors in the suburbs with the water issue. We're more metropolitan than not, because a lot of our employees live in the suburbs. So it's just a matter of reaching out and being able to come up with one project that we can do together to create the trust that's necessary to create that type of government. We haven't done that yet.
I would say that I believe that we have enough problems to solve right now in the city of Toledo that I wouldn't take on Unigov at this point. But I believe that we have a lot of cooperation in water, for example, and transportation. We can build on those. I'd like to see a lot more cooperation. And that would probably be the foundation for exploring Unigov later.
I think similarly as Mrs. Collins does, that we've got a lot of work to do in the city of Toledo. And that would be my first priority. Unigov would not be very high on my list of priorities. However, when I was on city council, I did support and vote for the joint economic development zone with the city of Maumee, and that was a really appropriate project for us to get into, and I would be happy to consider more of those kinds of projects.
Mayor Hicks Hudson?
I am currently working with various mayors throughout the region to work on different issues and projects that will help us to move toward the collaboration and for the mutual respect that I think that we can do within this area of Northwest Ohio. The issue of Unigov is much more complex than just saying yes or no. I think the various steps that we've taken through our regional partnerships, regional growth partnerships, TMACOG, other nonprofit, quasi-governmental bodies have helped us to move this issue forward.
Sandy?
I think we're a long way from Unigov. I think we have to rebuild fragile relationships. I think we have to become a community that's known for keeping its promises. Currently, there are some concerns in the community that we may be pulling out of a really exciting collaboration with the University of Toledo and the county and some of the townships that border Route 23 for the Dorr Street interchange. This could really revolutionize Dorr Street. This could help the Dorr and Reynolds area, provide a great gateway to the university, revitalize the rest of Dorr Street that was once a strong business area, and lead right into downtown. The community needs to trust us. They need to believe that we will keep our promises. That's a first step to finding then later shared efficiencies.
Thank you.
Mayor Hicks Hudson, the next question is for you. Name a city department that you found in need of a managerial overhaul. What did you do to fix that problem? And also, have you made any substantive changes in the system?
One of the first departments I think we have to look at, and there's been some steps done already, which is the Department of Public Utilities, where there was the performance audit that was done to look at ways in which we can streamline management, drive efficiencies, and bring confidence back to our ratepayers and our customers who use that particular department. What I have done is, since that time, we have hired the company to do the performance audit. We are looking at ways in which to engage, to change the way that we do business with the community by working in terms of our call City Hall and those types of specific examples of moving that department forward. In terms of management, we're changing the structure somewhat where there were more managers, and we're moving that down to 3 managers and trying to beef up the boots on the ground, so to speak.
I'd like to offer former Mayor Bell and former Mayor Finkbeiner 30 seconds each to offer a rebuttal on what they did along the same lines during their first years in office. Obviously, Mayor Finkbeiner, any one of your 3 terms, and Mr. Bell during your term.
You want to go
Mr.
first?
Bell, would you please go first?
Well, during my first term, remembering that we had a budget issue, one of the things that we were able to put together that it has become extremely efficient is the refuge system that we currently have. We actually took and ended up privatizing that particular system with union employees, and it enabled us to have a much more efficient operation. It saved us about $7 million a year. It's still giving savings to the city, so that was one of the more creative things that we did during that period of time.
Mr. Finkbeiner.
In the latter stages, the third term, Ignacio, we did not complete this, but I think it's important that we do it ASAP. and that is put the economic development team and the planning administration team together. We have not truly have a cut through the red tape office in the city of Toledo, and businessman and or woman, most of them smaller businessmen and women, constantly bring to my attention that what can you do to cut red tape at City Hall? I would urge us to put the economic development and planning and inspection people under one roof.
Okay, my question is for Ms. Spang. It's a pleasure to meet you. I understand that you went to 5 national budget conferences in the last year, most on your own dime, to make yourself an expert on budget reform. Now, based on the knowledge that you gained...
Those were not my, expert was not my words, that was Mr. Troy's words.
But you learned some
He is
stuff,
an expert.
right?
I
You
did.
learned some stuff. So based on what you learned, what budget reform would you implement if you became mayor?
Actually, I did not go to 5 budget conferences. I went to the National League of Cities Congressional Conference in Washington, and there was introduced to priority-based budgeting, which they are recommending. And then I followed up. The last conference I most recently attended was the annual conference of municipalities that are using priority-based budgeting. You know, before I wanted to bring this really innovative idea to Toledo, I wanted to know that it really worked, and I wanted to talk to people who had actually implemented it. And so it was a very valuable opportunity for me to really see what it does. It changes an indecipherable line item budget. A department has 30 employees. They buy this much paper and staples. Do we know if we should cut them or not? It turns it into programs. Prices each program, puts a metric to measure the success of each program, and then we can go to the community and get their input on the priorities. Because in tough economic times, we need to do the important things very well.
Sounds like you're excited about it, so would you introduce that to the Toledo if you became mayor?
Yes, I would. You know, the interesting thing about this election is that the person who becomes mayor will become mayor perhaps within 10 days of the election. And so if that's November 13th, November 15th, by law, a balanced budget has to be delivered to City Council. So of course, I'll be delivering the current administration's budget. We will have time before City Council has to vote on this to go through the first cycle of priority-based budgeting. And this will be a tool that will empower City Council to make good decisions, because it's really, they have the power of the purse. This will empower them to make good decisions for our community.
Okay, thank you.
That concludes part 1 of the debate. We will now move to the second part of the debate, and each candidate will answer every question, sort of like we did with the Unigov question. But we will do this as a kind of lightning round. We'll ask you to keep your answers to 45 seconds. So we'll begin this section with 3 questions from our journalists, and then we'll move to the questions from the public.
Mr. Bell, you'll handle this question first. This is a question on the minds of many Toledoans. Every candidate has talked about asking Washington and Columbus for more money for streets. Every single one of you has said that. To repave and, if needed, rebuild Toledo streets on a regular 20-year cycle, the budget would need to be increased to $64 million a year. Currently, it's expected that there will be barely $8 million for all capital improvements in the city, not just the streets, next year. The city's 2016 fiscal outlook leaves nothing, again, for residential street repaving. Keeping in mind that I already said everyone's talked about asking D.C. and Columbus for money, how will you pay to fix the streets?
There's only one way you pay to fix the streets. What you have to do is realize that Toledo is like an old house. I have an old house. And Toledoans are going to have to fix this old house. The only way you can do that, and what I have proposed, and I've said it multiple times, is being able to take the 3/4% levy to 1%, allocate, that would be about $18 million, move the money that we currently are taking out of capital improvements, which by the end of next year we can't do anymore, into capital improvements, make it a 10-year plan on the 1%, and be able to use that in a steady way for 10 years to be able to fix our roads. Also, in addition, put a panel of people that are citizens, concerned citizens, to review to make sure that that money is going exactly where it's supposed to go.
Thank you. Mrs. Collins.
What I believe is that this number is so large, and we need a comprehensive plan to fix the roads. It's so large that I believe that it will take possibly a bond issue to do this. And that's where I would look. I would establish the number we need for residential streets because there's less money available there. And I would ask the financial community how to finance this number over a period of perhaps 10 years.
Mr. Ferner.
Whether it's a bond issue, which if it's a voted bond issue would be covered by a property tax millage, or if it's a slight increase in the payroll income tax, either one of those are going to require some additional revenue from citizens. And both of those things would have to be voted on. So in the short term, and I'm talking about 2 or 3 years, I would also support that because there simply isn't enough money available to do the right job. But beyond that, and I don't mean waiting 2 or 3 years, but beginning at the same time, I would be organizing with cities around Ohio to demand that we get more of the local government fund. We're down $13 million a year from what we were 5 or 6 years ago. That would repave a lot of streets.
Mr. Finkbeiner.
We need a pavement management system that everybody trusts and believes in. We should use every penny of the street repair money. We went away from what I had practiced for 12 years, and that is that you did not use street repair money for anything but that. We will get additional help from the federal government and the state government because most states and local communities are in exactly the same predicament we are in, and there will be aid forthcoming. If you look around Toledo today, you see construction going on all over the place. Most of that is federal and state money.
Mayor.
What we have to do is be realistic that it's going to take a couple years to get those revenues that my opponents have talked about into the coffers, whether it's through a bond, not a bond, but an increase in income tax or property tax revenue coming in. In the interim, what we can do is leverage the dollars that we receive from the federal and state for fixing roads and use those to leverage to make sure that we get those roads done. Additionally, with the water and sewer projects that we're doing, we have to, again, be smart about using those projects to also fix our streets. Lastly, I agree about having a more professional look at how we make the determination of which roads need to be taken care of. University of Toledo has a wonderful program that we can use and should be using to help us determine which particular street needs to be taken care of.
Ms. Spang.
Thank you. I think it's unconscionable to talk about raising taxes in a community where the per capita income is less than $18,000 until we are absolutely certain that we're managing every dollar that the citizens entrust with us wisely. So I don't think that's an initial solution. I do think it's interesting that we've made a decision to almost exclusively do ODOT matching and not take care of our own residential streets. 90% of the streets in America are owned by the municipalities, and the federal and state governments are not, the federal government and the state governments are not giving the kind of help to municipalities that they used to give. So advocacy is a piece because there is the potential that Congress will pass a 6-year transportation bill after years of only 1-year stopgaps. Toledo's voice needs to be heard for some of those dollars.
Okay, so we're going to start with Ms. Spang on this next lightning round. We're going to go back the other direction, if you will. Now, my question is about crime and policing. People in Toledo are very concerned about crime. Many people have reached out to the Blade to let us know that that's an issue that's really on their minds. And right now, Toledo has one of the lowest police to population ratios in the state of Ohio. Now, that goes to response time when police come out when someone's called. So what I'd like to know from the panel is, will you hire a new police class? And the second part of the question, just as important, how will you pay for it? And also, will you promise not to lay off any police or firefighters during your administration? We'll start with Ms. Spang.
I've spoken with Chief Kroll about his goals of putting more officers on foot and on bicycles in communities, and I would like to see an expanded use of our community service officers. So obviously, a force of 700 is an ideal that we need to strive for. But at the same time, I can't commit to hiring more police officers until we know that we have those resources. So we may have to move officers so that we have an adequate street force. We may have to look at some of the ancillary programs that the police do. We may have to curtail some of those for a time so that we're sure that we make neighborhoods safe.
What about the other part of the question, ma'am, as far as committing to not laying off police or fire?
I think that one can never see the future, but I wouldn't anticipate at this point. I think it's important to keep the force level. I would like to grow the force as resources allow.
Mayor?
Thank you. We have plans for increasing, well, let me back up. We have recently graduated a class of 37 officers this year, and there are plans for having a new class in 2016. And in that new class, unfortunately, what we've only been able to do is to replace officers that are fit to retire or ready to retire. So it's the goal to maintain those. I believe that the strategies that our police chief has put into place are enough to help us move forward, although it's not adequate to deal with the question of crime and those things, but we are able to manage. And I disagree somewhat with the perspective of the number of police officers that we have. I think in the state of Ohio, we are in mid-range with those numbers.
Well, maybe I should clarify. I was
Okay.
referring to big cities in Ohio.
Well, when you talk about big cities, if you look at, for example, Cleveland has the highest per capita of police officers, and also their crime rate is there. So to mirror the number of police officers with the crime rate is not quite necessarily the way we should look at this. We should look at being smart about policing, be smart about how we engage the community, be smart about making sure that those programs, such as Block Watch, such as the community service officers, are used to help get folks to be empowered about their own safety.
So that class that's coming in 2016 is already
Yes.
budgeted for?
The plans are budgeted for that because we need to replace those officers that are projected to retire.
I'm going to ask that we not do follow-ups here, so we stick with the
Okay.
lightning round idea.
All right. Mr. Former Mayor Finkbeiner?
It's my understanding that we're looking at about a $3 to $5 million budget deficit at the end of this year. We need to keep as many of our employees in place that are valuable as we possibly can, not only police and fire, but others as well. But with a $3 to $5 million deficit, that's going to be challenging. We need to use this ComStat approach where you have a mogul gang task force moving into neighborhoods very assertively to deal with the gangs that are in the neighborhoods. We need to get summer jobs for young people. We have not done that for a decade or more. Lastly, we can get some of our police officers out from the safety building to the streets of the city of Toledo, and we need to do more of that as well.
Mr. Fern?
Thank you. I'm in favor of hiring a police class, but I think we also have to get more strategic and smarter on how we look at the whole issue of crime and the criminal justice system. And we need to invest in things like violence prevention programs for youth, employment programs, substance abuse programs, mental health programs, because we're simply never going to be able to arrest and jail our way to safe neighborhoods.
I believe we need to hire 2 classes of 40 each police for the next 2 years, and that's to have enough police in field operations. And that I would not lay them off. And I think that when you look at these statistics, you have to look at our city. And it's very city-specific as to crime. But I would like to say that in order to afford this, to increase the number of police, we can look at budgeted overtime. There's quite a bit of overtime budgeted that could be budgeted toward permanent employees. And I also believe that we need to look at the employees, ask them how to save money throughout the entire city workforce, working with the unions. Not be complaint-driven, but be quality-driven. And this is something that we haven't done yet here. And I believe there's great potential for savings.
Former Mayor Bill?
During the worst recession we've had since I've been alive, I was able to to hire 180 police officers during my 4-year period as mayor and 192 firefighters. But I think the key here is deployment, technology, along with that hiring. The question right now would be, where are those police officers deployed? And if there's about a response time, I think there has to be a benchmark that we should be attempting to achieve. To just hire officers to hire them? No, but we should have a standard that we're trying to meet. So from my standpoint, I believe, and I'm one of the few people that have been inside the safety forces and had to utilize safety officers, I believe that the employment is key and the continuation of hiring. And would I lay off firefighters and police officers? No.
One more question from the panel.
My question concerns the Toledo water system. In 2014, Toledo, which always boasted of its water, found that the water was unsafe to drink for a 54-hour period. How will you make sure that Toledo's water supply, that we don't have a repeat of that situation, and that Toledo's water supply continues to be safe to drink? I will start with, I guess, Mayor Bell.
I'm back to being first
Sorry.
again?
Well, we can start in the middle if you want.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Let's start with Mayor Finkbeiner then. Question concerns the water supply and how you're going to...
Understood, Tom, understood. We've had an awful lot of opinions as to what should be done, including from members of the panel here tonight. I would bring in 4 or 5 of the top water scientists in this country, ask them to spend a week to 10 days, ask the private sector to pay for it, perhaps help from the University of Toledo and Bowling Green State University, and ask those gentlemen and gentle ladies that at the end of that period of time to have on a sheet of paper a game plan for us not to have to deal 1 year from now with algae problems like we're having to deal with. I really think we need to get, the only question Mike Collins asked of me was water. How can we deal with it? And I said, get the best brains in this country in here to tell us how we can deal with this issue. I still want that to happen. Then we take it to Governor Snyder and Governor Kasich and ask them to take it to the Great Lakes governors so we're all on the same page working together, which we are not today.
Mayor Hicks Hudson.
We are taking care of the water. We have impaneled a blue ribbon committee that did just what Mayor Finkbeiner has suggested that happen, and that panel came back with the recommendation that we go to ozone treatment of our water. Additionally, we need to work with and collaborate with our regional partners from the mouth of the Maumee to Lake Erie to ensure that each community, each person is part of the solution so that we can reduce the organics that get into the lake. The work that has been done, we've created the early warning system that has allowed us to treat the water from the time it's intaked at the lake until it reaches the tap for each of us to drink. And this entire summer, there has not been any detect at the tap that caused us to have any problems that we did in 2014.
I think it's important to be realistic about the role of the city in this. We have 2 important projects underway: the Toledo Waterways Initiative, which will reduce, it's well along in process, and that will reduce the amount of sanitary sewer overflow that goes into our waterways. The other project that we're undertaking is an upgrade of Collins Park facilities that will exceed $350 million. So these are very important projects that the city had already begun to undertake and that we are continuing. And I think you can't minimize the importance of advocacy if it's done right, if you're with the right partners, and I think our other partners along the watershed really need to join in one voice so that we can approach, this isn't really a state problem, it's not even a federal problem, it's an international problem with our neighbor Canada. So I think advocacy really can make a difference in a situation like this.
Mayor Bell.
What I believe is that this is a regional issue, although Toledo owns the water system. And what I think we need to do is get involved with our partners to be able to make sure that they're involved with this discussion. What I would do in my administration is bring in an expert to run the utilities department in that particular area, because it is so important that we have good counsel in where we need to go here. In addition, I would propose that we lower the intake. One of the things about algae is that it floats right around that 3 to 4 feet area, And if we lowered our intake, we'd be very similar to Oregon, which has a lower intake than we do, and we'd have fresher water. I think that the innovation of ozone into the system now is a good thing, but we also need to work with the government, work with the state for other preventative measures.
I think we've proved that the city can keep the water supply safe, that we can fix toxic water. And many cities are doing this. They're spending millions of dollars. They've kept us safe this year. We can clean up toxic water. We just spend a lot of money on it. It's a problem bigger than any of the cities. It's the Great Lakes problem right now, and it is an international problem. We need to go to our federal government. We need to ask for an executive order to make Lake Erie and the Great Lakes a national treasure, and go at this in a positive sort of way where we get a lot more enforcement, a lot more protection. We need a lot of money into fixing this problem at the source. We need to not pollute the lake.
Regardless of what we do to improve the water treatment plant, we're never going to be able to treat our way out of this problem. We have to reduce the pollution that's going into the lake. And the first thing we need to do in order to reduce the pollution is to find out where it's coming from and who's responsible. And there's already a perfectly good system set up for doing this, to have the US EPA declare the Western Basin an impaired watershed and inventory every one of the polluters in the entire watershed. That will tell us what we need to know in order to start holding people accountable. Right now, the 70-some mega farms that are in the watershed are putting out the equivalent of the sewage of Chicago and Los Angeles, spraying it untreated on farm fields, and we're wondering why we have too much phosphorus in Lake Erie.
All right. Now the public gets a shot at you folks. We open the questions to everyone through the internet and social media, and we can't get all these really great questions in, but we can get a few in. We'll start with a question from the president of UT, Sharon Gaber. She asks, what are some of the greatest opportunities for the city of Toledo and UT to create partnerships? And we'll go from left to right and then reverse right to left so we don't get confused, more confused than we already are.
Some person.
Yes,
Your
Mayor.
left
Yes.
or our left?
Well, where I see an opportunity for the University of Toledo to help the city of Toledo, what we're trying to do and what is happening with Randy Ostra and what he's doing with ProMedica, he's creating foot traffic in our downtown area. The idea of being able to move some portion of a school here that's currently at the university to the downtown area, I think would be very effective, be it the School of Law, be it the School of Honors, something that gets younger people in the downtown area to create the foot traffic that creates synergy. We all know that the young people are our future, but they're also creating a lot of energy, a lot of positive energy that can be utilized to turn cities around. Those are the places people want to go. Those are the places people want to live. And I think that if we have that intervention with the University of Toledo and a project downtown, it could be extremely successful.
Mrs. Collins.
I'm sure there are many areas of collaboration that are possible between the university and the city. What I would find most exciting would be to collaborate on the solutions to the water problem, the pollution problem of the Great Lakes. The university could pull together other universities of the area, and I believe that we could turn our greatest problem into perhaps our greatest success when we show how it can be done for the future, not only to clean up toxic water, but to prevent the pollution. And the university has many disciplines that I believe we could benefit from including at the table for this. It's not just science, but marketing and business and so on.
I think the university would be a great asset to the city of Toledo, and what you have at the university are people who study things in great depth, and the city of Toledo could take advantage of the knowledge that is gained from those studies. For example, one thing would be the Urban Affairs Institute studies the problems of urban areas. The city of Toledo has not used the Urban Affairs Institute adequately for many years, and I think that would be a great place for the city of Toledo to partner with the university.
The number one thing that we can and should do is provide jobs for University of Toledo students between their junior and senior year, internships. The Chamber of Commerce, our large corporations, our large hospitals ought to take a page from Philadelphia and commit to students at this university and Bowling Green State University and Lord's University that we will do our best to find internships for our junior to seniors at the college level, and upon graduation we'll look first at Northwest Ohio college graduates before they look anyplace else to fill openings on their payroll. Philadelphia has done that for a decade, and it's worked very nicely.
Mayor?
Thank you. I have talked with President Gaber about this very issue almost as soon as she came to the city of Toledo. It is important for us to have a partnership between the university. We talked about internships. We talked about it being a laboratory for the students to learn and to take what they're learning in the classroom and to use it in the real world. Additionally, we have questions and issues that we need to get solved, and this is a research institution, and we should use those and partner with those to do that. As the president of Toledo City Council, I worked very closely with Sue Wiest, who was one of the persons with the Urban Affairs Center, and I hope that we'll be able to continue to do that work and to collaborate between the university and between the city of Toledo so that we will use those resources and be able to keep students here and to have them understand that this is a city where they not only learn but where they can grow and live.
Ms. Spang.
Thank you. There are so many ways that we can collaborate with the university. So many cities have really capitalized on the educational institutions in their communities. But you know, the University of Toledo has some great entrepreneurial programs. And their Pitch and Pour, for example, where people come and it's a weekend of entrepreneurial ideas, and they can, there's a project selected at the end. You know, we need to be ready to catch those entrepreneurs. And we have empty buildings. We need, that's where the Small Business Navigator can come in, connect those entrepreneurs to resources. So we want to retain those bright ideas and those bright minds in Toledo.
Okay. We have a question from Alfonso Navarez, and we'll start with you, Ms. Spang. What would you do to help the inner city fight crime, blight, and the feeling of being completely forgotten?
I think that despair, lack of opportunity, is a root cause of crime. I think we all accept that. I think that providing opportunity, economic opportunity, it's not just a civic responsibility, it's actually an economic imperative. Everyone in this city has to grow if we're going to be a successful city. I'd like to touch on the opiate epidemic because I think it's a critical problem. You know, we need to make it very hard to use and very easy to get into recovery services. I'd like to see one phone number that could bring all of our recovery services together and get someone into the recovery process. Also, I think we need to listen to the people and de-emphasize enforcement of marijuana laws and step our enforcement up on opiates.
Thank you. This is a question that's near and dear to my heart because of the work, how I got into the whole idea of the elected office. In working with the residents at the Junction Avenue project, it was to help empower them, to get them to connected to the city services that they needed so that they would be able to know that the city not only cares, but the city is there to provide those types of services that they need. That group of community organization and members have moved from a position of where they did not expect any services to where they know how to access those city services and have made great strides in terms of connecting with TMACOG and other departments, not only just in the city, but other benefits that we have throughout the community that helps them to take ownership and to work with them. It is our job as the city to provide those resources, to provide those avenues for which they are able to move forward. And that is one of the things that we have to do so folks are not felt that they're forgotten.
Mr. Burris, you're very much aware of, as is the mayor, because she and I have both been at FLOC, Farm Labor Organizing Committee, where Baldemar Velasquez has put in place a model that is working. And that is where young Hispanic Latino men and women are working with Toledo police officers to gain respect and trust for each other. sharing information about what can be helpful to stabilizing the communities in which they live. It is, in my judgment, a combination of community-oriented policing, where the officers are on the streets and they're very familiar with the men and women that live in that neighborhood. And by the same token, the youngsters are given opportunities for things like jobs and other things that they need to be stable in their lifestyles. That teamwork is working for the Homies program down in South Toledo.
When I answered the part of this question earlier, I mentioned youth violence prevention, substance abuse, and mental health. Youth violence prevention, the program that Flock is doing, needs to be expanded. We also need mental health programs and substance abuse programs that really work. We need to support ongoing programs like the Reentry Coalition that helps people, once they get out of the criminal justice system, to stay out by providing the kinds of services that they need to get jobs, to restart their lives. So these are some of the things. I think the Richmond, California example that we've heard a lot about that has reduced the number of murders in that city is something that we also need to take a look at.
I would just like to say that for social mobility, education is the key, and we have to support the education available in this city, and we have to do it in many ways, ensuring the safety of the students, for example. When I spoke with some of the Flock individuals, they were students, and that's the kind of conversation we were having. So to make those educational opportunities available, because that's the only way that we can lead to jobs and social mobility. And I understand the hopelessness and despair if that is not available.
Mayor Bell.
Being a person that is from North Toledo, one of the key concerns in being able to get people's dignity back is to be able to get them jobs. Jobs is a key concern in being able to keep people working. We also need to be able to intervene and have a more neighborhood approach with our police system, and I think that the chief's attempting to do that. But the key on any issue when I was young, and it's no different now, is you give me something to do, you give me an opportunity to do it, I can take care of myself. And then so I believe that jobs is the key to doing this. This brings the dignity back to people, and it allows for their independence, and it makes them feel better about who they are, which helps lower the crime rate.
Next question is from Luke Shortridge. He says, I am the father of 3. Our West Toledo home has been burglarized twice in 2 years. What immediate and practical thing will you do to keep our streets safe? And we'll start with Mayor Bell.
Well, one of the things that we were doing in West Toledo when I was mayor the last time, and probably the only time, okay, was that we were actually making sure that we had the deployment of police officers on bikes. We had them deployed on motorcycles. We had them deployed throughout the city, and we were very focused on having them in the neighborhoods. I don't know what the deployment ratio is now, but I'm quite sure, and we've had some conversations earlier, that we need to be able to make sure that our deployment ratio for people or for police officers in the street is greater. Whatever it takes, whether it's hiring, whether it's moving people out of offices, we need to make sure that the deployment is higher so that the response time will drop, which will make people feel safer.
I want to speak about something called beat integrity or community policing, but that is a key to law enforcement that was old-fashioned but yet brought back in recent years, and I know our police force is doing it. My husband Mike told me that when he was a policeman that if a lot of things went wrong in his neighborhood, that was his beat, the sergeant would be saying, how did you let this go wrong in your neighborhood? Because it was his beat, it became his neighborhood, and he knew the people, and they knew him. We are doing that. We need to do more of that.
There really is no magic answer to this gentleman's question. I think what we've been hearing here all needs to be done better. We need to do more of it, whether it's deployment of officers, community policing. But I think, again, some of the answers that people here have given, are going to have to be part of it, and that is jobs. There's no magic way that we're going to keep people from breaking into people's homes, but if people are working and have a sense of pride in themselves and a sense of dignity, that's going to take care of a large portion of the problem. And all of these things combined, the tactical part of better deployment and the strategic part of building the kind of economy that's going to build wealth in our community so that people can have a better life, I think is what we're going to need to do.
We haven't mentioned something we're all very proud of, and that is Block Watch. I'd be interested to know if they have a Block Watch program in that gentleman's neighborhood. We have some really outstanding Block Watch programs scattered throughout our community, and then we have patches where there isn't a Block Watch program, and I get a call about crime, and the first thing I'll ask is there a Block Watch program in your neighborhood? And the answer I will get is no. Individuals that do a great job working with our police and with our city administrators, Southwick Mall area to mention one, where David Lemon does a phenomenal job as a private citizen out there. We need to understand that the police cannot do it all, and they need private citizen help and assistance as partners in fighting crime in each and every neighborhood of the city of Toledo.
It's very difficult to add on because Mayor Finkbeiner stole my addition to the other comments that have been made previously, and that is about Block Watch, and it's about community and neighborhoods getting engaged in the fight against crime. I think if we look at Block Watch and we look at community and neighbors looking out for one another, and also a way to incentivize the loot that someone gets by doing a burglary, because oftentimes they are using that to get money to take care of a habit. So if we look at ways to use the recovery through pawn shops and other things like that, that might be helpful as well for us to do that. But I think all of the things that we've talked about before, beat integrity, community policing, will help.
Well, it is certainly a question with a holistic answer, and I'm at the end of the line here. But I think that something that I can add to some of the other comments that were made, too many of our neighborhoods are hollow neighborhoods. You may have housing, but you can't buy goods and services. There's not recreation opportunities. I think we need to work on refilling those empty retail strips that are in every neighborhood by having incentive programs. The entrepreneurial spirit cuts across all barriers. And I think that when you have lively businesses, I think that foot traffic does help add to safety. It gives a greater sense of community and placemaking, and it provides those neighborhood jobs that I think we've all agreed are so necessary.
Keith, we have a question from a viewer, Sam Harden, would like to ask. It's a yes or no question. I think 30 seconds each would be sufficient. And again, it's a yes or no question. Would your administration take down the controversial red light and speed photo enforcement camera devices? Can we start with Mr. Ferner, and we'll follow with Mr. Finkbeiner, and then I'll decide who goes after.
I'll give you an honest answer because I haven't really considered that. I don't know.
Mr. Finkbeiner.
I would follow the legal system that has, at this moment, declared that they're illegal in the state of Ohio. It is being appealed, and I don't know that we're ultimately going to have any other choice but what is coming down from us from Columbus. I'm not sure that home rule is going to win on this baby. If it does, I would probably study long and hard before I would abandon it, because I think it does bring safety and added coffers to the department, to the finance department of the city.
Mayor.
Is it a yes or no?
It is a yes or no question.
No.
You will keep them.
I would keep them.
Thank you. Ms. Spang.
It's an interesting question because we're down in revenues this year at the half year, about $780,000 for our red light camera revenues. So they're certainly not the dollar driver that they once were. It's an interesting philosophical question for me because initially I really didn't think I thought that was a good thing, but I have to say I think I've moderated my own driving. So I think I'd want to talk to Chief Kroll about this and the impact that he really thinks it's made on safety, because obviously it's not having the economic impact. So I think safety really needs to be the question here. So I'm going to have to say that I would have to have that conversation before I could say yes or
Folks,
no.
if we're going to have time for summations, we need to get
Yes or no, Mrs.
very
Collins.
back to yes or no.
I would keep the red light cameras for safety if it is lawful, but I believe our choice is going to be made for us. We're going to find out whether we can or not, and I will follow the law.
Thank you. Mr. Bell.
The answer is that I would keep the cameras. Being a former paramedic, a person who has pulled people out of cars at intersections, it is a safety issue. It isn't a revenue issue. It is a safety issue. So I would keep the cameras.
We now come to closing statements. Each candidate has 90 seconds. You don't have to take 90 seconds, but you have up to 90 seconds to make a closing statement summarizing your campaign message. And we'll start with Ms. Spang. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll start. We've got to do this by the order out of the hat. So we'll start with Mr. Bell, then Mrs. Collins, Mr. Ferner.
I'm number 5.
I'm number 6.
I'm number 1.
There you go.
Well, I was right the first time then. We'll start with Ms. Spang.
No,
No.
Ms. Collins.
Ms. Collins.
Oh, Ms. Collins.
Yes. Oh, hi, I'm Sandy Drabick Collins, and I'm running for mayor because I want to complete the 2 years left in the unexpired term of my husband, Mike. I wouldn't be here except that we lost Mike, and that I saw the things he fought so hard for, the things he was working on, the issues, I saw them slipping. So that's why I decided to run. I helped build his platform, and I can fulfill his platform the way he was going to do. He did so much, but I could continue it and build on it. And I also know next steps, I believe. And I'm the only one who would do this, to fulfill this. I am qualified and experienced. I studied LG in college and graduate school, I'll throw that in. But I have managed a large state agency with statewide responsibility, over 1,000 people, a budget of over $2 billion, and that kind of expertise is needed here now. My functions, my leadership at state government was about public works and computer services and human resources, all the things that a city does. I have experience doing at that statewide level. And we have big problems. We need leadership now to move us forward. And I would like you to think about my message and me when you vote in November.
Now, Ms. Spang.
Thank you. Toledo, it's time for a new story. I learned a new phrase recently, liminal space. It's the space between stories, between an old story that isn't working anymore and a new story that hasn't been written yet. It literally means threshold. And that's where we stand. We stand on the threshold of something new. But in order to tell our new story, we have to stop telling our old story. I think all of the candidates will agree strong infrastructure, jobs, growth need to be a part of that story. But as mayor, I want to lead us to a shared vision of a strong, vibrant city. That will require everyone's input from every neighborhood. This election isn't about a change in leadership. It's about a change in culture. Reliving and retelling the past isn't change. We have to look at Toledo with new, fresh eyes. We need to become more innovative. We need to build on our strengths. The new story of Toledo is waiting to be told. It's a story of collaboration, powerful partnerships, engaged citizens. And we all will have to make some new choices to take hold of that new story. But we all have the power to choose.
Mayor.
Thank you. I first want to thank the Blade for this opportunity to tell the reasons why I should continue as mayor for the city of Toledo. As you know, I came to this seat not seeking it, but because of the position that I was placed in as president of council. And as council, by charter, when we had the untimely death of Mayor Collins, I ascended to the office of mayor. After sitting in that seat and seeing the need for us to continue the movement, the forward movement of the city, and we are at a cusp in which there are things that we can do and what we must do in order to make the city better. We must have safe and livable neighborhoods. We must have an infrastructure that we can rely on. We must make sure that our water is safe to drink each and every time we turn on the tap. We must make sure that there are job opportunities for all citizens within the city of Toledo. I am sitting in that seat. I am making those decisions. I am working with our partners throughout the region. I'm rebuilding relationships. I'm forging new ways in which we can become not only a city of today, but a city of tomorrow. The 22nd century is here now, and we need to prepare for it in ways in which I am capable of doing it. My history as being the youngest of 8 children, working in all levels of government, working at a time in state government when we had a major tension in terms of financial problems that we had to meet. I was there when we did do that, and I'm here now to continue on to make sure that we move the city forward, that we don't miss a beat, and that we are able to be the city of a great city in the future. Thank you.
Mayor Finkbeiner.
Thank you, Toledo Blade, and thank you, University of Toledo, for hosting this. Our city is struggling. We have problems with our water. Our streets are undrivable in some circumstances. I'm concerned about a possible loss of jobs at Jeep, and we recently couldn't make a $1.3 million payment to CCNO. When I was mayor, we had nearly $4 billion invested in the city of Toledo, including a new Jeep plant, including a new Owens Corning fiberglass building, including the Docks restaurants in East Toledo, a new prison built in North Toledo. We also were at All America City, and we're a most livable city, and in 2007 our drinking water was listed as the 5th best drinking water in the United States of America. Some people can talk an excellent game. I'm a doer. We will get the job done. Thank you very much.
Mr. Ferner.
Albert Einstein said, "The world as we have created it is a product of our thinking, and it can't be changed without changing our thinking." I've spent my life thinking about why we've produced the city and the world that we have now, from why we can't build a parking garage underground instead of putting it on Promenade Park, to why did we go to war against the people of Iraq who caused us no harm. And being an organizer, not just a thinker, I work with other people who feel likewise, and we do something about it. It can feel scary challenging the status quo, but as an organizer, that's where I work. And I've seen what happens when people begin to feel they can make a difference. I've felt the confidence and pride people gain when they decide they will have a hand in their own destiny and not just be buffeted by the winds. And this is exactly how I will approach the job of Toledo's mayor. I ask, why should Toledo think of itself as a desperate charity case that has to pauperize our schools when multinational corporations demand huge tax breaks? I ask, how can we build a local economy that's more self-reliant, that keeps more of our money working here in Toledo, building wealth for middle-class families and lifting people out of poverty? I ask, how can we make our neighborhoods safe without going bankrupt, building bigger jails and putting ever more people in them? I believe we are ready to change the way we think about this city we have created. And with the power of democracy behind us, I believe Toledoans are ready to have a hand in their own destiny. Thank you.
Mayor Bell.
I believe that our city is at a tipping point, and that is why I've gotten back into the race. I believe that there is an instability starting to be created that, if it continues, could put us in trouble. I was the mayor that stabilized the system the last time it was unstable. I'm the one that can do it again. But it's going to take that we have to have relationships. We have to be able to work with our neighbors. We have to be able to create a synergy that is actually starting with some of the people stepping up, like ProMedica, like Hickory Farms moving downtown, like all those good things that are starting to happen, that people are starting to invest in our city. But if we don't keep the movement forward, we're going to lose those people. And I know that we have to be able to fix the roads. We have to be able to fix the water system. We have to be able to make sure people feel safe. We have to be able to make sure that our neighborhoods are doing good. This is a very crucial time in the city of Toledo. If we don't make the appropriate moves now, we could jeopardize our future for years to come. So because of that, I've entered this race. And what I'm asking for you all to do today is to give me your trust again and vote for me. I understand politically I may have made a misstep in the past for some people, but it was all done because I care about our city.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our debate. Our thanks to the candidates for their participation. Our thanks to the University of Toledo for hosting the debate. And thanks to the journalists for their questions. Finally, thank you to the citizens of Toledo for their questions and for tuning in. Good night.